The package arrived at 7:15 a.m. Plain brown paper, addressed to Prince Louis. The security guard's hands trembled as he lifted it. Something felt wrong. Within minutes, the bomb detection dog sat down sharply. The alert signal? Inside that innocent-looking box was enough explosive power to kill a 5-year-old child. If it had made it through security, if anyone had opened it in the palace, Louis would be dead. But catching the bomber was only the beginning. What Prince William decided next would shock the entire world. Defy his own father, the king, and break centuries of royal tradition. Because some threats don't end when you catch the bad guy. Sometimes the real danger is what comes after. And William was about to make a choice that would change the monarchy forever. The morning of October 12th began like any other at Kensington Palace. The sun had barely risen over London when the day's deliveries started arriving at the security checkpoint. Sergeant James Crawford had been working royal protection for 15 years, long enough to know that routine was both a blessing and a potential danger. Every package, every envelope, every delivery had to be treated with the same level of scrutiny. No matter how innocent it appeared, James stood at his post near the palace's side entrance. The one used primarily for staff and deliveries. The main gates were for official visitors and media, carefully choreographed for public consumption. But this entrance was where the real work happened, where the daily operations of a royal household took place away from cameras and curious eyes. He'd checked over 300 packages already that week. It was only Wednesday. The delivery van pulled up at exactly 7:15 in the morning. James recognized the driver, a man named Colin, who worked for one of the approved courier services that regularly delivered to the palace. Colin had been making deliveries here for at least 3 years. His background had been checked thoroughly, his route was monitored, and he'd never once caused concern. That familiarity was precisely what made James's training kick in with extra vigilance. Complacency killed more people than obvious threats. Colin climbed out of the van with his usual cheerful greeting and opened the back doors. Today's delivery included the typical assortment: packages from fashion houses, sending samples for upcoming events, correspondence from various charities and organizations, official documents from government offices, and personal items ordered by staff members. James began the inspection process, running each package through the X-ray scanner while Colin filled out the delivery manifest. The package that would change everything was near the bottom of the stack. It was medium-sized, roughly the dimensions of a shoebox, wrapped in plain brown paper. The address label was printed, not handwritten, and it was addressed specifically to Prince Louis at Kensington Palace. That detail alone made James pause. Mail addressed directly to the children was relatively rare and always required extra scrutiny. James lifted the package carefully, feeling its weight. It was heavier than he expected for its size. The weight distribution felt odd, concentrated in one area rather than evenly distributed. His 15 years of experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now those instincts were screaming that something wasn't right. "Colin, where did this one come from?" James asked, keeping his voice casual but firm. Colin checked his manifest and frowned slightly. "That one was added to my route this morning at the depot. Last-minute addition. The paperwork says it came through the regular postal system. Flagged for courier delivery because of the royal address." James set the package down on the inspection table and looked more closely at the label. The return address was listed as a charity organization in Manchester, but something about the printing quality seemed off. The label looked too clean, too perfect. Like it had been created specifically for this package, rather than being part of a standard organizational mailing system. "I'm going to need to run some additional checks on this one," James said, pulling out his radio. "Standard protocol for packages addressed to the children." Colin nodded, unsurprised. He'd been through extra security screenings before. Working royal deliveries meant accepting that some packages would trigger additional scrutiny. It was part of the job. James radioed to the security control room, requesting a supervisor and the explosive detection unit. Within 3 minutes, 2 additional security officers arrived, along with a bomb detection dog named Rex. The German Shepherd was trained to detect dozens of different explosive compounds and had never given a false Positive in his 5 years of service, Rex approached the package with his handler, Detective Sarah Mills, guiding him carefully. The dog circled the inspection table twice, his nose working methodically over every inch of the package. Then he sat down sharply and looked up at Sarah, giving the alert signal. Sarah's expression turned grave. "We've got a positive indication," she said quietly. "James, clear the area. Colin, I need you to step back to your van and wait there. Nobody touches this package until the bomb squad arrives." The next 30 minutes moved with practiced efficiency. The area around the security checkpoint was evacuated. The bomb disposal unit arrived in their specialized vehicle. Officers suited up in protective gear that made them look like astronauts. The package was carefully moved to a containment vessel and transported to a secure area of the palace grounds, where it could be examined safely inside the palace. Prince William was in a morning meeting with his private secretary when the call came through. His protection officer, a man named Detective Inspector Mark Richardson, entered the room quietly and waited for an appropriate moment to interrupt. William noticed immediately and excused himself from the meeting. "What's wrong?" William asked. He'd learned to read Mark's expressions over the years, and the look on his face now was one William had never seen before. Not quite alarm, but certainly serious concern. "Sir, there's been a security incident with a package delivery. It was addressed to Prince Louis. The package tested positive for explosive materials. Has been taken to the bomb disposal unit. I wanted to inform you immediately, though I should stress that the situation is under control and there's no immediate danger to anyone in the palace." William felt his stomach drop. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. His mind immediately went to Louis, who was upstairs in the nursery with his nanny, probably playing with his toys or working on a puzzle. Charlotte and George were at school, thank God, safely away from the palace. But Louis was here, and someone had sent a package that might contain a bomb, addressed specifically to his youngest son. "Where's Louis now?" William asked, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. "He's in the nursery with his nanny, Rebecca. We've increased security in that area as a precaution, but again, the package never entered the palace. It was intercepted at the external security checkpoint. Prince Louis was never in any danger." William nodded, processing the information. His protection training kicked in automatically. Don't panic. Get the facts. Understand the situation before making decisions. But underneath that training, he was just a father terrified for his child's safety. "Want to see the security footage," William said. "And I want a full briefing from the bomb disposal unit as soon as they've assessed the package. Also, contact Catherine immediately. She needs to know about this before she hears it from anyone else." Catherine, Princess of Wales, was at a charity event across London. William knew she would want to come home immediately, and he wouldn't blame her. He wanted to run upstairs and grab Louis, hold him close, and never let go. But he had responsibilities that went beyond his personal feelings. This wasn't just about his family. This was about the security of the royal household, about understanding what had happened and preventing it from happening again. Mark escorted William to the security control room, a high-tech facility hidden away in the palace's lower levels. Banks of monitors showed feeds from hundreds of cameras positioned throughout the palace grounds and surrounding areas. Technicians worked quietly at their stations, monitoring everything in real time. The head of palace security, Commander David Patterson, was already there, reviewing footage of the package delivery. "Your Royal Highness," Patterson said, standing as William entered. "I'm very sorry about this situation. I want to assure you that our protocols worked exactly as designed. The package was intercepted before it posed any danger to anyone in the palace." "Show me what happened," William said, his voice steady, despite the turmoil inside him. Patterson pulled up the footage on the main screen. William watched as Sergeant Crawford inspected the package. Saw the moment he paused and called for additional screening, watched Rex give his alert signal. The entire sequence took less than 10 minutes from the package's arrival to its removal by the bomb squad. "Who sent it?" William asked. "Do we know anything about the sender?" Patterson pulled up another screen showing enhanced images of the package label. "The return address lists a charity organization in Manchester, but we've already confirmed that organization didn't send this package. They have no record of any mailing to Kensington Palace, and their mailing procedures don't match what we see here." The label was created specifically for this package. We're treating this as a deliberate threat, not a mistake or prank. William felt anger beginning to override his fear. Someone had deliberately tried to harm his son. Someone had created a package, labeled it with Lewis's name, and sent it through the mail system, hoping it would reach a 5-year-old child. The calculated nature of it made his blood run cold. "Have you informed the police?" William asked. "Scotland Yard's counter-terrorism unit is already on site," Patterson replied. "They'll be taking lead on the investigation once the bomb squad has finished their assessment. We're also coordinating with MI5 on the assumption that this could be related to a larger threat." Technician interrupted them. "Commander, the bomb disposal unit is ready to provide their initial assessment." The bomb disposal officer appeared on a video feed, still in partial protective gear. His face was serious. "We've completed our initial examination of the package. I can confirm it contains an improvised explosive device. The device is relatively sophisticated, not something assembled by an amateur. It was designed to detonate when the package was opened. The explosive charge is relatively small, but at close range it would have caused serious injury or death to whoever opened it." William felt the room tilt slightly. If that package had made it through security, if someone in the palace had opened it without proper screening, if Lewis had somehow gotten his hands on it, he forced himself to stop that line of thinking. It hadn't happened. The security protocols had worked. His son was safe, but the question that haunted him was simple and terrifying. Who would try to kill a 5-year-old child? The officer continued. "We're preserving the device for forensic examination. The components will be analyzed to try to determine where they were purchased and potentially track down the builder. The packaging will be processed for fingerprints, DNA, and any other trace evidence. This is now an attempted murder investigation with counterterrorism implications." William thanked the officer and turned to Patterson. "I want security increased immediately. Not just for Lewis, for all 3 children. Review every protocol, every procedure. I want to know how someone was able to get a bomb this far into our security system, even if it was intercepted before entering the palace. And I want daily briefings on the investigation until we know who did this and why." "No." Patterson nodded. "Already underway, sir. We're also coordinating with the security details for Prince George and Princess Charlotte at their school. Additional protection officers have been assigned." William's phone buzzed. It was Catherine. She'd been informed and was already in her car heading back to the palace. William felt relief wash over him. Whatever came next, they would face it together. But as he stood in that security control room, watching replays of a bomb addressed to his youngest son, William knew that something fundamental had changed. The royal family had faced threats before. It came with the territory, but this felt different. This was personal, targeted, and sophisticated. Someone out there wanted to hurt his children badly enough to build a bomb and try to send it directly to them. And until that person was caught, none of them would truly be safe. The investigation was just beginning. But William was already making plans that would shock the public, the media, and even his own family. Because protecting his children wasn't negotiable. And if the existing systems couldn't guarantee their safety, then those systems would have to change. No matter what it cost. No matter who objected. His children's lives depended on it. The move to Balmoral happened with surprising speed. Within 48 hours of the bombing attempt, the entire household had relocated to the Scottish estate. William had insisted on moving quickly, before whoever sent the bomb could attempt another attack. The logistics were complicated, but the royal household staff were experienced at rapid relocations. By Friday evening, George, Charlotte, and Louis were settled into their rooms at Balmoral, seemingly excited about their unexpected Scottish adventure. William threw himself into the investigation with an intensity that worried everyone around him. He spent hours in a secure communications room that had been set up at Balmoral, reviewing case files, analyzing evidence reports, and participating in video conferences with the investigative team in London. Detective Chief Inspector Foster had kept her word about including him, though William could tell it made her uncomfortable. The forensic analysis of the bomb had revealed several important details. The explosive material was a type of plastic explosive typically used in military applications. suggesting the builder had either military connections or access to black market weapon suppliers. The trigger mechanism was sophisticated, designed to activate when the package was opened. And most importantly, there were traces of DNA on the packaging that didn't match anyone in the system. "The DNA is our best lead," Foster explained during one of their daily briefings. "We're running it through every database we have access to, including military personnel records and criminal databases across Europe. If this person has ever been arrested, served in any NATO military, or provided DNA for any official purpose, we'll find a match." "How long will that take?" William asked. "Could be days. Could be weeks. DNA matching isn't instantaneous when you're searching millions of records. But we're prioritizing this case at the highest level." William rubbed his eyes, exhausted from days of interrupted sleep and constant worry. "What about the postal system? How did the package enter the delivery network?" "That's where it gets interesting," Foster said, pulling up a map on her screen. "We've traced the package back through the sorting facilities. It was introduced into the system at a distribution center in Birmingham, posted with a false return address. But here's what concerns us. It was introduced by someone with legitimate access to the facility. The package didn't go through normal public posting channels. It was introduced directly into the internal sorting system." William felt his stomach tighten. "You're saying someone who works for the Postal Service is involved? Or someone who used to work there? Or someone with connections who could get them access?" "We're reviewing all employees at that facility, but it's a large operation with hundreds of workers across multiple shifts." "What about security footage?" "Being analyzed now, but the facility processes thousands of packages daily. Finding one specific package being introduced into the system is like finding a needle in a haystack. We're working on it, but it's going to take time." Time was something William felt they didn't have. Every day that passed without catching the bomber was another day that person could be planning their next attempt. He'd increased security around his children to levels that would have seemed paranoid before the bombing. Armed protection officers were with them constantly. Every meal was prepared by trusted staff and tested. Every room was swept for listening devices or hidden dangers. The children were essentially living in a protective bubble. William could see the strain starting to show. George had become quieter, more withdrawn. He knew enough to understand the seriousness of what had happened, and the weight of that knowledge was affecting him. Charlotte tried to maintain her normal cheerfulness, but William caught her watching the protection officers with worried eyes. Only Louis seemed genuinely unaffected, treating the whole thing as an extended holiday in Scotland. Catherine was struggling too. She'd always been the more grounded parent, the one who insisted on normalcy and routine for the children. But maintaining normalcy was impossible under the current circumstances. She spent hours trying to create educational activities and fun experiences for the children. But William could see the exhaustion in her face, the constant worry that never quite left her eyes. 1 week after the bombing attempt, William received a call that changed the direction of the investigation. Detective Chief Inspector Foster's voice was tight with controlled excitement when she appeared on his video screen. "We have a DNA match," she said without preamble. "Thomas Whitmore, age 37, former Royal Marines Explosive Ordnance Disposal Technician. Served for 12 years before being dishonorably discharged 3 years ago for assaulting a superior officer. The assault happened after Whitmore was passed over for a promotion he felt he deserved." William's mind raced. "Do we know where he is now?" "That's the problem. He's dropped off the grid. Last known address was in Manchester, but he hasn't been seen there in 6 months. No employment records, no benefit claims, no digital footprint. He's deliberately staying invisible. What's his connection to my family? Why would he target Louis?" Foster's expression turned grim. "We're still working on that. But here's what we do know. Whitmore served in the same general time period as some of the royal protection officers who have worked for your household. It's possible he knows some of them might have information about palace security procedures. We're interviewing everyone who served with him. Could he be working with someone inside the palace?" William asked, voicing the fear that had been growing in his mind. "We can't rule it out, but there's no evidence of that so far. It's more likely he's used his military connections to gather information about security procedures, then exploited that knowledge to get his package through initial screening. But why Louis specifically? Why not target me or Catherine? That's the question we're trying to answer. We're digging into Whitmore's background, looking for any connection to your family or any reason he might have to target Prince Louis specifically. So far, we haven't found one. After the call ended, William sat in the communications room, staring at Thomas Whitmore's military record photo. The man had cold eyes and a hard expression. According to his service record, he'd been an excellent EOD technician, with multiple commendations for bravery and technical skill. But something had gone wrong. The assault that ended his career had been serious enough to warrant criminal charges, though he'd avoided jail time. William made a decision. He called Commander Patterson, head of Palace Security. "I want to interview the protection officers who served with Whitmore," William said. "Personally, today, Your Royal Highness, that's not necessary. DCI Foster's team is handling those interviews. I don't care. These are officers who work in my household. If there's any possibility one of them has been compromised or is feeding information to Whitmore, I want to know about it. And I want to look them in the eye when they answer questions about it." Patterson sighed, but agreed. By that evening, 3 protection officers who had served with Whitmore in the Royal Marines were assembled in a secure room at Balmoral. William interviewed each of them separately, with DCI Foster and Commander Patterson present. The first 2 interviews revealed nothing useful. Both officers had known Whitmore casually, but hadn't maintained contact after his discharge. They described him as competent but arrogant, someone who always believed he was smarter than his superiors. Neither could think of any reason he would target the royal family. The third interview was different. Detective Sergeant Michael Price was a protection officer who had been with the royal household for 5 years. He'd served with Whitmore for 2 years before Whitmore's discharge. When William asked about their relationship, Price hesitated just slightly before answering. "We were friendly during our service together," Price said carefully. "Not close friends, but we got along well enough. After his discharge, he contacted me a few times. Wanted to talk about his situation, feeling wronged by the military. I sympathized but kept my distance. His bitterness was concerning." "When was the last time he contacted you?" William asked. Price shifted uncomfortably. "About 6 months ago. He called me, asking if I knew of any security positions available. Said he was having trouble finding work because of his discharge record. I told him I couldn't help him." "Did you report this contact to your superiors?" DCI Foster asked. Price looked embarrassed. "No, ma'am. I should have given that he was contacting a member of Royal Protection, but it seemed like a harmless conversation. He was just asking about job opportunities." William felt anger rising. "Did he ask you any questions about palace security? About procedures or protocols?" "He asked general questions about what the job was like. I didn't tell him anything classified or specific. Just general information about the work." "Did he ask about my children specifically?" William pressed. Price went pale. "He asked about what it was like protecting the younger royals. Said he imagined that must be challenging, keeping children safe. I told him it required constant vigilance, and that every package and delivery was screened thoroughly." William could see Foster and Patterson exchanging significant looks. Price had just confirmed that Whitmore had been gathering intelligence about palace security, specifically about protecting the children and screening deliveries. "Did he ask about specific children?" Foster asked. "Did he mention Prince Louis by name?" "No, nothing that specific. Just general questions about protecting royal children." After Price was dismissed, Foster looked at William grimly. "That's our connection. Whitmore was systematically gathering information about your household security. He knew packages were screened, which is why he made the bombs sophisticated enough to potentially bypass X-ray detection. He was trying to stay ahead of your security protocols." "But why Louis?" William asked again, frustrated. "That's what I don't understand. Why target a 5-year-old specifically?" "Maybe Louis wasn't the specific target," Patterson suggested. "Maybe Whitmore was just targeting the youngest, most vulnerable member of your family, the one he thought would be least protected." William felt sick. The calculated nature of it was somehow worse than random violence. Whitmore had thought through his attack, gathering information, building a sophisticated weapon, and deliberately targeting the child he thought would be easiest to harm. "We need to find him," William said flatly. "I don't care what resources it takes. Find him before he tries again." Over the next 48 hours, the investigation intensified. Police raided Whitmore's last known addresses and interviewed everyone who had ever known him. His financial records were examined, looking for any transactions that might indicate where he was hiding. Intelligence services put out alerts to their informant networks, offering rewards for information about his location. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of Whitmore's former military colleagues, a man who had remained loyal to him after his discharge, became concerned when he saw Whitmore's photo on the news in connection with the bombing attempt. He called the police tip line and provided information about a remote cottage in the Scottish Highlands where Whitmore had been staying. The cottage was isolated, accessible only by a rough dirt road, perfect for someone trying to stay hidden. A tactical team was assembled, including counterterrorism officers and members of the Special Boat Service, the Royal Marines Special Forces Unit. William wanted to be part of the assault team, but both Patterson and Foster refused. Absolutely. It was too dangerous, and William's presence would complicate the operation. Instead, William watched via secure video feed as the tactical team approached the cottage in the early morning darkness. The operation was swift and professional. Flashbang grenades shattered the windows, and operators poured into the cottage through multiple entry points simultaneously. Within 90 seconds, they had Whitmore in custody, face down on the floor with his hands secured behind his back. William watched as they pulled Whitmore to his feet. The former Marine didn't resist, didn't try to fight. He just stared at the camera with that same cold expression from his military ID photo. Then he smiled, and William felt his blood run cold. That smile suggested Whitmore had expected this, had planned for it somehow. "Search every inch of that cottage," William ordered through the communications link. "If he's smiling, there's a reason." The tactical team conducted a thorough search of the property. In a shed behind the cottage, they found Whitmore's workshop. Tables covered with electronic components, chemicals for making explosives, and detailed notes about bomb construction. But what made William's heart stop was what they found pinned to a bulletin board on the wall. Photographs, dozens of them. Pictures of George, Charlotte, and Louis taken from a distance. Images of Kensington Palace from multiple angles. Photos of the children's school. Screenshots of news articles about the family. And in the center of the board, a photograph of Louis at a public event 6 months ago, circled in red marker. "He's been planning this for at least 6 months, Foster said, her voice tight with anger. "This wasn't a spontaneous act. This was a sustained campaign targeting your son specifically." William stared at the photographs transmitted to his screen. The obsessive nature of Whitmore's preparation was clear. This wasn't just revenge against the military or the royal family in general. This was something personal, something focused entirely on Louis. "I want to talk to him," William said suddenly. "Absolutely not," Patterson and Foster said simultaneously. "I want to know why," William continued, ignoring their objections. "Why, Louis? What did my 5-year-old son do to make this man hate him enough to try to kill him?" "I need to know." Foster shook her head firmly. "Your Royal Highness, conducting an interview with you present would compromise any prosecution. His lawyers would argue intimidation, undue influence. We need this case to be airtight. Then I'll watch. Set up a video feed. I won't be in the room, won't say anything, but I'm going to hear what he has to say." It took several hours to arrange, but eventually, Foster conducted the interview with Whitmore while William watched via secure video link. Whitmore had been processed, read his rights, and provided with a lawyer. He sat in the interview room, looking calm and composed, showing no remorse or concern. "Mr. Whitmore," Foster began, "you've been arrested in connection with the attempted bombing of Prince Louis. We have forensic evidence linking you to the device. And we've found your workshop with materials and plans for additional attacks. You're facing multiple life sentences for attempted murder, terrorism charges, and weapons offenses. Do you understand the severity of your situation?" Whitmore nodded but said nothing. "Why Prince Louis?" Foster asked directly. "Why target a 5-year-old child?" For a long moment, Whitmore was silent. Then he leaned forward, and when he spoke, his voice was cold and matter-of-fact. "Because they don't deserve their perfect life. Their perfect family. Everything handed to them on a silver platter while people like me get thrown away. This is about your discharge from the military. Foster asked. This is about a system that protects privilege while destroying people who actually serve. I gave 12 years to the Royal Marines. I was the best EOD tech in my unit. But one mistake, one moment of losing my temper with an incompetent officer, and everything was taken from me. While he gestured vaguely, presumably meaning the royal family, they get everything. Money, security, adoration, and their children get to grow up safe and protected, never having to earn anything. So you decided to kill a child because you were angry about your discharge? Foster's voice was laced with disgust. Whitmore's expression didn't change. I decided to teach them that their privilege doesn't make them invincible, that their security isn't perfect, that their children are just as vulnerable as anyone else's. William listened to this explanation and felt not just anger, but a deep sadness. This man had twisted his own failures into a justification for murdering an innocent child. There was no real reason, no logical explanation that would make sense to a rational person, just bitterness and rage that had festered until it found an outlet in violence. The interview continued for another hour, but Whitmore revealed nothing more of substance. He'd acted alone, had no accomplices, and had planned only the one attack. The bomb addressed to Louis had been his entire plan. He'd assumed it would either succeed, killing Louis and devastating the royal family, or fail and lead to his capture. Either way, he'd get his moment of revenge against the system he felt had wronged him. After the interview ended, William sat alone in the communications room at Balmoral. The threat was over. Whitmore was in custody and would spend the rest of his life in prison. His children were safe. But William couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. He'd always known the royal family faced threats. But this had been different. This had been personal, targeted, and disturbingly close to succeeding. If Sergeant Crawford hadn't trusted his instincts and ordered additional screening of that package, if Rex hadn't alerted on it, if any of a dozen security procedures had failed, Louis would be dead right now. The randomness of it terrified William. Their safety had come down to one security officer's intuition and a well-trained dog. Everything else, all the protocols and procedures and expensive security systems, had been bypassed by one bitter former Marine with bomb-making skills and obsessive hatred. Catherine found him there an hour later, staring at nothing. She sat down beside him and took his hand. "They told me they caught him," she said softly. "They did. It's over." "Then why do you look like that?" William turned to look at his wife. "Because I realized something today. We can't protect them." "Not really. We can put all the security measures in place, hire all the protection officers, screen every delivery, and it still might not be enough. There will always be someone who finds a way around our defenses. Someone who hates us enough to try." Catherine was quiet for a moment. "So what do? Lock them away forever? Never let them experience life because someone might try to hurt them?" "I don't know," William admitted. "But I know I can't go back to the way things were. Something has to change." What William didn't tell Catherine yet was that he'd already made a decision, a shocking one that would alter their family's future in ways that would surprise everyone. But that conversation would have to wait. For now, he just wanted to hold his wife and know that his children were safe. At least for today. 3 weeks after Thomas Whitmore's arrest, William called a private meeting with his father, King Charles, at Balmoral. The conversation he was about to have would be difficult, possibly the most challenging discussion he'd ever had with his father. But after weeks of sleepless nights and constant worry about his children's safety, William had made a decision that he knew would shock not just his family but the entire nation. Charles arrived at Balmoral on a gray afternoon, the Scottish weather matching the somber mood. They met in the estate's library, a room lined with centuries-old books and filled with the weight of royal history. William had asked that they meet alone, without advisors or staff. This conversation needed to happen between father and son, between one king and his heir. "You look tired, William," Charles said as they settled into leather chairs near the fireplace. "I haven't been sleeping well," William admitted. "Not since the bombing attempt." Charles nodded sympathetically. I understand. The security briefings have been disturbing, but they caught the man responsible. Whitmore will spend the rest of his life in prison. Your children are safe now, are they? William asked. Are they really safe? Or did we just get lucky this time? William, we've always faced threats. It comes with who we are. The security services are excellent at their job. They protected Louis exactly as they should have. But they almost didn't, William said, his voice rising slightly. One security officer's instinct made the difference between Louis being alive or dead. If Sergeant Crawford hadn't ordered that extra screening, if the dog hadn't alerted that bomb would have made it into the palace. Do you understand how close we came? I do, Charles said quietly. But we can't live our lives paralyzed by fear of what might happen. We have duties, responsibilities that go beyond our personal concerns. William took a deep breath. This was the moment he'd been dreading. Father, I've made a decision. I'm stepping back from royal duties for the next year. Catherine and I are taking the children somewhere private, somewhere secure. Somewhere they can just be children without the constant threat of violence hanging over them. The silence that followed was profound. Charles stared at his son, as if he'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled but clearly shocked. You're what? I'm taking a sabbatical from royal duties. The children will be privately tutored. Catherine and I will split our time. One of us always with them. We'll maintain minimal public engagements, but our priority will be our family's security and our children's well-being. Charles stood up, agitation clear in his movements. William, you can't be serious. You're the Prince of Wales. You have obligations that cannot simply be set aside because you're frightened. I'm not frightened, William said, standing to face his father. I'm being realistic. Someone tried to murder my 5-year-old son. Not kidnap him for ransom. Not threaten him. Actually murder him. And the only reason they failed was luck and good security procedures. Next time we might not be so lucky. So you're going to hide? Charles asked, his voice sharp with disapproval. That's your solution? To run away and teach your children that when things get difficult, we abandon our responsibilities? I'm teaching my children that their lives matter more than tradition, William shot back. I'm teaching them that their father will do whatever it takes to keep them safe, even if it means making decisions that are unpopular or unprecedented. Charles paced the room, clearly struggling to contain his anger. Do you have any idea what this will do? The media will have a field day. The public will see the future king abandoning his duties. It will damage the monarchy's reputation irreparably. The monarchy's reputation? William's voice was incredulous. Father, my son almost died. And you're worried about reputation? I'm worried about the institution we serve, Charles said firmly. The monarchy isn't about us as individuals. It's about something larger, something that transcends our personal concerns. People depend on us. They need us to be constant, reliable, present. If we start disappearing every time things get difficult, what message does that send? William felt years of frustration and suppressed resentment bubbling to the surface. What message does it send if I let duty kill my children? What exactly am I protecting by sacrificing my family on the altar of royal responsibility? You're being dramatic, Charles said dismissively. The security services will adjust their protocols, will increase protection. But you cannot simply walk away from your obligations because one disturbed individual sent a bomb. One disturbed individual who almost succeeded, William corrected, and who won't be the last. There will always be someone else, someone with a grudge or a cause or just pure hatred. I can increase security all I want, but I cannot guarantee my children's safety while maintaining our current public profile. So I'm making a choice. My children come first. Charles sat back down, looking suddenly old and tired. Your mother faced threats. I faced threats. You've faced threats your entire life. We don't get the luxury of stepping back. This is the life we were born into. I didn't choose this life, William said quietly, but my children definitely didn't choose it. George didn't ask to be third in line to the throne. Charlotte and Louis didn't ask for any of this. They're children who deserve to have a childhood that isn't consumed by security threats and public obligations. I'm going to give them that, even if it means disappointing you." The reference to his mother had touched something in Charles. He was quiet for a long moment, memories clearly playing across his face. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Your mother would have understood what you're feeling right now. She always struggled with balancing duty and family. She wanted you boys to have as normal a life as possible, within the constraints of your positions. Then you understand why I have to do this," William pressed. "Not forever. Just for a year. Let the children be children. Let them feel safe again. Let Catherine and me figure out how to protect them while still fulfilling our roles. We need time to adjust, to heal, to create new security protocols that actually work." Charles studied his son for a long moment. "Where would you go?" "I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to tell anyone. The fewer people who know, the safer we'll be. We'll maintain communication. We'll be available for genuine emergencies, but our location will be kept absolutely private. The Prime Minister will need to be informed," Charles said, "as will the security services. The Prime Minister can be told I'm taking a sabbatical for family security reasons. The security services will know only what they absolutely need to know. I'm not taking chances with my children's lives because someone might be offended by being kept in the dark." Charles stood and walked to the window, looking out over the Balmoral estate. "You're asking me to support a decision that goes against everything I believe about duty and responsibility. I'm asking you to be a grandfather before you're a king," William said. "I'm asking you to understand that sometimes protecting our family has to come before protecting the institution." Charles turned back to face him. "And if I refuse to support this, if I publicly oppose your decision?" William felt his heart sink, but his resolve didn't waver. "Then you'll force me to choose between my father and my children. And I think we both know how that choice will go." The two men stared at each other across the library. Centuries of royal tradition and expectation pressing down on both of them. Finally, Charles sighed deeply. "I don't agree with this decision. I think you're making a mistake. But you're a grown man, and you're their father. I suppose I have to trust that you're doing what you believe is right." He paused. "How long do you intend to maintain this? Sabbatical? 1 year. Maybe less if the situation changes. But I need at least a year to feel confident that we've done everything possible to protect the children and to give them time to recover from the trauma of this incident and the children." "What do they think about all this?" William smiled slightly. "Louis thinks it's an adventure. Charlotte is adaptable. George is struggling. He's old enough to understand the gravity of what happened, and it's affecting him. He needs time away from the spotlight to just be a 10-year-old boy again." Charles nodded slowly. "I'll support your decision publicly, though privately I maintain my objections. But William, understand this. You'll face enormous criticism. The media will be ruthless. There will be accusations of cowardice, of abandoning duty, of setting a terrible precedent. Can you and Catherine handle that?" "We'll have to," William said firmly, "because the alternative is unacceptable." The meeting with Charles was just the first of many difficult conversations. Over the next week, William and Catherine met with the Prime Minister, senior members of the royal household, and key security officials. Each conversation brought new objections, new concerns, new attempts to convince them to reconsider. The Prime Minister was sympathetic, but worried about the political implications. The royal household staff were concerned about the logistics and precedent. Security officials wanted detailed information about the family's plans. Information William refused to provide to anyone except a very small, trusted circle. Through it all, William and Catherine remained united in their decision. They'd chosen a location for their sabbatical, a private estate in rural New Zealand, owned by a trusted friend who had offered it unconditionally. The property was isolated, defensible, far enough from Britain that the media would struggle to maintain constant surveillance. A small security team, carefully vetted, would accompany them. The children would be tutored by private teachers, also thoroughly screened. The announcement was made on a cold November morning. A simple statement from Kensington Palace explained that the Prince and Princess of Wales were taking a year-long sabbatical for family security reasons. Following the recent attempted attack on Prince Louis, they would maintain minimal official duties, but would be stepping back from public life too. Focus on their children's well-being and security. The media reaction was exactly as predicted. Explosive. Headlines screamed about royal abdication of duty. Commentators debated whether William had the right to step back from his responsibilities. Social media erupted with opinions ranging from supportive to viciously critical. Some praised William for putting his children first. Others condemned him for cowardice and selfishness. William and Catherine weathered the storm by ignoring it completely. They moved quickly, departing Britain within days of the announcement before the media could establish permanent surveillance positions. The journey to New Zealand was carefully orchestrated, with multiple decoy flights and misdirection to throw off anyone trying to track them. When they finally arrived at the estate in New Zealand's South Island, William felt something he hadn't felt in months: relief. The property was beautiful, surrounded by mountains and forests, completely isolated from the outside world. There were no cameras, no crowds, no constant security threats, just their family and the small security team that would protect them. The first few weeks were an adjustment. George struggled initially with being away from his friends and his school. Charlotte missed her activities and familiar surroundings. Louis, as always, adapted quickly, delighted by the adventure of living somewhere new. But gradually, all three children began to relax in a way William hadn't seen since before the bombing attempt. George started smiling again, really smiling, not the careful, controlled expression he'd worn since learning someone had tried to kill his brother. Charlotte's natural exuberance returned, and Louis, blessed with the short memory of childhood, seemed to forget completely that anything frightening had ever happened. William and Catherine fell into a new routine. They took turns handling the limited official duties that couldn't be completely abandoned, conducting virtual meetings and maintaining contact with key officials, but most of their time was devoted to simply being parents. They took the children on hikes through the mountains. They taught them to fish in the estate's lake. They had movie nights and game nights and lazy mornings where no one had to rush to appointments or obligations. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when William felt guilty about stepping back from his duties. There were times when Catherine worried about the long-term implications of their decision. They both knew they were living in a bubble that couldn't last forever. But for now, for this year, their children were safe and happy in getting to be just children. 6 months into their sabbatical, William received a letter from his father. It was handwritten, which was rare for Charles, and personal in a way their relationship rarely was. "William," the letter began, "I've watched from afar as you and Catherine have navigated these past months. I still believe you made a mistake in stepping back so completely from your duties. But I can also see, through the photos and videos you've shared, that your children are thriving. George looks happy in a way I haven't seen in years, and I suppose that matters more than my opinions about duty and tradition. Perhaps I've been wrong to hold so tightly to the old ways. Perhaps there's room in this modern monarchy for putting family first occasionally. Your mother would have approved of your decision, I think. She always said the most important title any of us held was parent. When you return, I know you will return, we'll face the challenges together. But for now, enjoy this time with your children. They're only young once, and you're giving them a gift that few royal children have ever received: childhood free from the weight of duty and expectation. Your loving father, Charles." William read the letter 3 times, feeling emotions he couldn't quite name. It wasn't a complete endorsement of his decision, but it was acceptance. And coming from his father, that was more than he'd hoped for. As the year progressed, William began thinking about their eventual return to Britain. The sabbatical had served its purpose. The children were healed from the trauma of the bombing attempt. New security protocols had been developed and implemented. Thomas Whitmore was in prison for life, and there were no other credible threats on the horizon. But William knew they couldn't go back to exactly the way things were before. Something fundamental had changed in him during this year away. He'd learned that it was possible to balance duty with family, that sometimes the most important thing a future king could do was be a present father, When they returned to Britain in the following autumn, it was to a different reception than they'd faced when leaving. The year away had done something unexpected. It had humanized the royal family in a way that decades of carefully managed public relations never had. People had seen a father willing to sacrifice his reputation to protect his children. They'd seen a family choosing love over duty, at least temporarily. The children returned to school, but with significantly enhanced security that was carefully designed to be unobtrusive. William and Catherine resumed their royal duties, but with new boundaries about protecting their family's private time. And the entire royal household implemented new security protocols based on lessons learned from the bombing attempt. One evening, a year after returning to Britain, William tucked Louis into bed. His youngest son was now 7, growing up fast, with no clear memory of the bomb that had almost killed him. As William turned to leave, Louis called out to him, "Daddy, why did we go to New Zealand?" "George said it was because someone tried to hurt me, but I don't remember that." William sat back down on the edge of the bed. "Someone made a very bad choice and tried to do something that could have hurt our family, but they didn't succeed. And we went to New Zealand to make sure everyone stayed safe and to have time to be a family without worries." "Did you get in trouble for taking us away?" Louis asked, with the perceptive innocence of children. "Some people thought I should have made different choices," William admitted. "But I did what I thought was right to protect you and your brother and sister. That's what parents do. We make the hard choices to keep our children safe." Louis thought about this for a moment. "I'm glad we went. It was fun." William smiled and kissed his son's forehead. "I'm glad too, buddy. Now get some sleep." As he left Louis's room, William found Catherine waiting in the hallway. She'd clearly heard the conversation. They walked together to their own room, and Catherine squeezed his hand. "No regrets?" she asked. William thought about everything that had happened. The bombing attempt, the investigation, his decision to step back, the year in New Zealand, the criticism and support, the changes in their family dynamics. It had been the most challenging year of his life in many ways. But looking back on it now, with his children safe and thriving, the answer was easy. "No regrets," he said firmly. "We did what we had to do to protect our family, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat." The shocking decision William had made after a guard intercepted that suspicious package had changed everything. It had challenged centuries of royal tradition, tested relationships within the family, and forced a modern monarchy to confront uncomfortable questions about duty versus family. But in the end, it had given 3 royal children something priceless: a father who would do anything to keep them safe, even if it meant defying expectations and making choices that shocked the world. And for William, that made every difficult moment, every criticism, every sacrifice worth it. Because some decisions, the truly important ones, aren't about duty or tradition or public opinion. They're about love, about family, and about being willing to do whatever it takes to protect the people who matter most. The guard who had intercepted that package had saved Louis's life that morning, but William's shocking decision had saved something else: his children's childhood, his family's peace, and his own soul. And that was worth more than any crown or title or tradition could ever be.